And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Blake, why do I feel like you're reveling just a little bit, and I don't mean to bring up NFL, but why do I feel like you're reveling just a little bit in Bryce Young getting benched? Why do I have that feeling?
Actually, it's probably a little bit the opposite for me.
Really?
I think Dave Tepper is the worst owner maybe in sports. I think that they have.
Okay, you agree with me.
Yeah, I think they completely failed him. I do think that he, for what it's worth, though, I said this when he was coming out and nobody wanted to believe me. In big moments, Bryce Young did not perform well.
I think that has less to do with his issues right now. But the first part you said is absolutely correct. Like, he's gotten completely screwed. He has all the tools, but to get bailed on after 2 weeks with the new head coach is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that whole organization is a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that my team, the Saints, are in that division. I wish they would have given him more, but look, man, it is what it is. That kid could go somewhere else, and he could really make something of himself. Dave Tepper. I mean, when I saw David Tepper on that Microsoft when they launched Windows 94, looking like a what's the word that the kids are using now? Looking like a square or whatever. I mean, the dude looked like
I don't know if that's
but just looking like a loser. Anyway, this is the second time in 2 days that we've led off with the NFL. I'm just glad that Monday Night Football allowed to go to 7:15 so that they didn't want to compete with us. Is exactly what they told me. So, nevertheless, but yeah, I actually like Bryce Young. I think he's a good player, good kid, and I hope that he gets back to form here. Speaking of that, we do have some big matchups that we got to talk about here tonight. Josh Heupel goes back to Oklahoma to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. Joe, I think that this is going to be the prime matchup of the weekend. Tennessee rolling on all cylinders. I think Oklahoma getting welcomed to the SEC. This one might be a good test for them.
I appreciate a little bit of I wouldn't say they're shots, but some of the remarks that Heupel's making this week, where he said today that he thinks that the offense, when they're on the field, that the Oklahoma crowd's going to be quiet for him. I think that's funny. I think he understands the setting that he's stepping into. It really is super unique, though. It's a very interesting, cool thing that the first matchup for Oklahoma in the SEC.
Oh, you know why they did that.
They did it on purpose, but it is cool. I can appreciate if it was deliberate, which it probably was, that this was the matchup that they chose.
I'm gonna throw this out there. I know that Oklahoma has a very tough schedule. I'm just gonna throw this out there. This is for other sports, but I just hear me out here. There are some SEC head coaches in other sports that are pissed off with Greg Sankey because there are a lot of opponents that, I'll give an example, LSU baseball. They have to go to Texas and to Oklahoma, and they're the premier baseball team in the conference. Like LSU baseball is the Alabama of football, right? And they have to go to both Texas and Oklahoma. And I will tell you, Joe, there are some head coaches around here, speaking of the matchups and favorability that both of those programs have gotten, like Georgia goes to Texas.
It's a very good point. It's a very, very good point.
Texas needs to be going to Georgia. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they welcomed them in. They've given them some favorable matchups at home, some really good opponents at home. So it's really interesting. But in reference to this game, look, man, I'm going to throw it out there. Tennessee might go in there and whip up on them. After what I saw from Tulane and what I saw from Oklahoma the last 2 weeks, I know that Oklahoma beat Tennessee. Jackson Arnold might be in trouble here, bud.
You and I'm actually surprised. You and I are going to have a very different prediction here. I think that Tennessee wins this game, but I don't think it's going to be anything more than a 10-point game. I really don't. Dude, that Oklahoma defense is way better than anyone wants to give them any credit for.
No,
I think it's gone gone because of the struggles that Jackson Arnold has had. But I'm intrigued for when we get to that preview today then, because it sounds like you and I are not going to be agreeing on it a bit.
Well, we're going to agree on a lot of things. The thing that I'm just looking at is that Jackson Arnold's running for his life against Tulane. What happens when he faces a P4 opponent, which would,
good point.
That's the thing that would scare me the most. So we'll talk about that. Also, Joe, is USC going to make a statement this week nationally? They made one in week 1 against LSU. Do they go into Ann Arbor and make another one as their first Big Ten matchup going up against the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines.
Well, see, you're talking about scheduling. This is how you were supposed to do it. You're supposed to make USC have to go
Correct.
on the road to Michigan to welcome them. And it's this is going to be a very fitting setting, though, for USC, because they do get this opportunity to showcase themselves against a team that just won a national championship. It's crazy to think about, though, how in the preseason we overlooked this game a little bit. This wasn't as big of an opportunity as we might have thought for USC, but they're climbing right now. They're only 2-0, but they're climbing. This is an opportunity for them to say, we're amongst the top Big Ten teams this year, and we're going to be in the conversation for the playoff.
I kept thinking about this because I watched Kirby Smart's postgame show, and then I listened to him today, and then I listened to Brian Kelly, and then I listened to Lincoln Riley. I love listening to coaches speak. I know that I'm a psychopath, but you know what I feel that's going on at USC that I'm gonna touch on a little bit here too. They had a whole offseason of people telling them how bad they suck, and when that happens,
including myself,
correct, not this guy, but the culture gets formed. And I think Anthony Lynn presents a very strong challenge and difficulty for what will be a new technical starting quarterback in Alex Orji, who's going to get the nod against USC. We'll talk about that as well. We'll also go to a ranked matchup, one of the rare ranked matchups that we have this week. The bar burner in and of itself that everybody predicted would be a big game going into week 4, Nebraska versus Illinois.
Well, we laugh about this because on paper –
And Vandy screwed us, by the way. I wanted Vandy in Missouri. Vandy screwed us.
Vanderbilt screwed me, man. I went around on every single radio appearance that I did, and I do too many of them. Everyone asks, what's your lock of the week? It's the most confident I've ever been in a bet, saying they were going to cover 10.5 points against Georgia State, who got a new head coach in the middle of the spring. They had the last team to get a new head coach.
Which is so wild.
Fire Clark Lee.
Okay, calm down.
They lost to Georgia State.
Okay, well, which is so wild and all that is because you went 10-0 last week.
Well, I'm a savant. Well, and also on my VSiN, when I was on VSiN, my picks, I went 5-1. My only incorrect betting pick was the Vanderbilt one. No, I'm pissed off about that. It is really crazy how we transitioned from week 1 talking about how South Carolina was the worst team in the SEC and that Vanderbilt was on the rise and was going to be a really good defensive team. And that's already completely flipped itself on its head. Like, completely flipped itself. That's why we try not to get too overreactive to week 1. But to talk about Illinois, Nebraska, sneaky good game. I think this is going to be a really good game on a Friday night, kind of like what we had with that Arizona Kansas State matchup. But I think this one's going to be much more competitive.
It's going to be competitive. I think Illinois has, even though their defense has been good, they've really kind of struggled with the running game at times. The stats don't necessarily show it, but if you watch them, like watch some of their games like I watched last week, and I thought that Luke Altmaier played well. Yeah. I'm really interested in this game. 2 tough guy games. You know what I mean? 2 tough teams playing. It's going to be a very tough game. So looking forward to that one. So we'll break all that down. Let me ask you this question before we started off. Let's just do this because Billy Napier was not fired yesterday, and a lot of people thought that he would be fired yesterday. He says that there's no discussion going into right now about him and his job security. I got to be honest. I'm calling BS on Billy Napier. There's got to be conversations because there are multiple people that cover Florida that have a lot of really good sources and contacts that are coming out and saying, Joe, that these conversations are being had. Joe, I think that you got to rip the Band-Aid off if you're Florida at some point. Did you see this today?
I didn't see his comments about it, but I agree with you. It was the whole segment that we had yesterday that it's just, what are you going to get out of keeping him around for longer? Are you trying to hope
the only thing that I can think, okay, is that Ron Roberts, who, yes, I do know him. I've had many a conversation with Ron Roberts in my day, and that does not stop the fact that I think he's an arse, okay? And I'm not going to say the curse word because, what it is. But I think Ron Roberts would burn that place to the ground. I think Gainesville would be no more. He's that big of an asshole. And so I think that, Joe, when you're moving on from a head coach, you also need to have an interim ready to go. I think that's why it took A&M a little bit longer than it did. It took them an extra week. But I don't even know who Florida has this week. Is it Central Florida? I don't even know.
No, they have Mississippi State.
God bless Jesus if they can't beat Mississippi State, who got housed by Toledo. Which, by the way, that Mississippi State schedule, I love my guys over there at Mississippi State, but oh my God, they're
by the way, I take a lot of pride in my correctness with my Mississippi State takes in the preseason, saying that team was going to be a dead body, and more importantly, I said that Will Rogers wasn't very good, and they lost to Washington State. Yeah. I'm taking a slight victory lap there.
Well, that game wasn't all on Will Rogers either.
He didn't play very good.
Neither did his defense, offensive line, running backs, or receivers.
Well, do you see this theory, though, and not to go down a rabbit hole, do you see this theory, though, that Jedd Fisch is in talks for the Florida job, and a lot of UW fans are pissed off because they're believing this conspiracy theory that he was distracted going into the Apple Cup. Apparently, that's
See, I want to bring this up too because LGZ, a good friend of mine, brings this up. He says that there's an interim president at Florida that complicates things because Strickland's got to go. Their AD.
Yep,
dude, they're in a bit. So in all of that, I would assume that Fisch has had conversations with boosters. I don't know if he's had conversations with people that make decisions, right? So
because they don't have a settled administration for the university at all.
They don't. And I think that that's the part about Florida that makes this so much more difficult. So look, all coming full circle. Is Fisch going to leave after 1 year? Florida is his alma mater and his home. So look, we'll see. We'll continue to monitor that as it goes on. But, it's funny. Remember the meme people made of you with your face after I tricked you that Billy Napier was fired. You're not going to have that again, I don't think, because I'm pretty sure that this is coming.
Yeah, I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be surprised.
All right, let's get to it. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. Share to all those groups if you're on Facebook. Joe, the people on Facebook showing us some serious love here. Yeah. So we want to continue to thank you all on Facebook. Do us a favor. Share to all those groups, all the social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube, closing in on 9,000 subscribers. Check and make sure that you're subscribed. If you haven't checked, just make sure that you're subscribed. Hit that notification bell. We're always publishing content over there on YouTube. Also, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. We greatly appreciate all of you that do that. But I got to admit something, man. I went to work out today, and I feel lighter because his team's 3-0. His Pitt Panthers. Chris Gaines, not to be forgotten, is Chris Gates Fitness. Joe, tell the people about him.
Of course, if you want to get in shape, the season started, but if you want to get back on track, maybe you got a little bit too overexcited with drinking and eating for the first couple of weeks, you want to get refocused, make sure to head over to chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp. Training camp is an online fitness community designed specifically for sports fans to help you get results with your health and fitness without cutting out everything that you love, like drinking beer and tailgating for football games the rest of this fall. In training camp, you'll get all the support that you need to build muscle, burn fat, and stay consistent with your workouts. And at the same time, you'll instantly join a community of like-minded people doing the same thing. Visit chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp or click the link in the descriptions and use that code RuffinoJoe to get a discount on your first month. There are 2, 3, and 4-day options that you can use to sign up, as well as a step counter challenge where the winner is going to receive a free walk pad. Go on over to chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp.
Everybody do us a favor, hit the like and share. Let's talk about our good friends over at BetOnline. We come back and break down Tennessee, Oklahoma next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50. That's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50 to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. By the way, I want to make this very well known. Joe and I have been doing extra segments on Tuesdays that were not live, but we're doing extra segments that are published on Tuesdays. We'll be breaking down Utah and Oklahoma State tomorrow, another premier matchup that I think Cam Rising likely still out, by the way.
Yep.
Isaac Wilson, brother of Zach Wilson, is in at quarterback. So this is what you need to do. If you haven't done so already, go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. We're always publishing content over on the YouTube channel. Joe, let's get to the premier matchup of the week. So we've talked about so much Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. What will it look like? Well, we saw Texas last year, right? They go into Bama. They beat Bama. So everybody felt like, for Texas at least, with all the success that they had a season ago, that Texas was going to be SEC ready based off of what they did to Alabama early in the year last year. Well, here's the truth. We haven't seen Oklahoma be in an SEC schedule, and now they start that slate. And it's ironic, Joe. We talked about this in the open. They're starting against a former quarterback of theirs in Josh Heupel, and Tennessee going into Norman is going to be a big deal. It's a premier matchup of the week. I turn it over to you here. When you look at this matchup, what do you see happening?
So I was fully prepared to come into this segment, Blake, and say that I thought that Oklahoma was going to get smoked. I really did. Tennessee has been on a ridiculous roll, and I know that two of those games have been against Chattanooga and Kent State, who they were up 65-0 at halftime on, but they also completely demolished NC State. That is an ACC opponent that's supposed to be a competent and competitive team in the ACC, and you completely embarrassed them. They're averaging 63 points per game right now compared to the 4.3 that their opponents are averaging, 336 rushing yards, 7 yards per carry. They're doing some goofy stuff statistically. I was fully ready to be able to say here, even though Tennessee hasn't faced anyone, I'm buying in. Oklahoma hasn't really played anybody either, but I have to give Oklahoma where the credit is due. Offensively, they're working through some stuff right now. Jackson Arnold's still not there. He's still making mistakes. He's still turning the ball over. The offensive line, like we predicted in the offseason, is not meshing together the way that it could. But the biggest thing that I get to give Oklahoma credit for, Brent Venables has himself a defense. That defense is phenomenal. They played so poorly on offense against Houston, but that defense came downhill hard as hell, got after Donovan Smith. They wrapped up. They produced pressures. Right now, they're only allowing 166 pass yards per game. I misread that. They're only allowing 77 rush yards per game. 2.2 yards per carry is what they're allowing. They're also only allowing 30% on third downs to their opponents. So they are really, really freaking good on defense. If this game is kept close, it's going to be because they're able to produce pressures on Nico, and they're able to play a really stout game on D.
I think that they can do that early. Okay, but there's three main questions that I have going into this game. A lot of them revolved around Oklahoma. Number one, can their O-line protect Jackson Arnold enough? And then number two, look, Arnold last week, as an example, had to use his legs a lot. He was getting pressured a lot. Look, Tulane had 3 sacks in the second half. I know that they got up big, but they couldn't finish. And I know that this happens with a new team or a younger team, especially when you're talking offensively. Look, you started out hot. Jackson Arnold was running with his legs a lot, but you couldn't finish off Tulane, right? They kept him around. They let him stay around. Joe, they gave up 3 sacks in the second half, and then one of them that should have been a 4th sack, Jackson Arnold evades the pressure, and then he throws a pick 6 to Grubbs and then the game's, it's a 1-score game. Okay, look, people will forget with about 9 minutes to go in that game against Tulane, Oklahoma more than likely should have been called for a pass interference on that 4th down call that would have kept the drive going for Tulane. They got really bailed out there, and Bowman on a tip pass got a pick. Their defense is really good, and I agree with that. The question becomes is, Joe, I think Tennessee's defensive line and front seven is really good too. I think they're really good. And so when I look at a bad O-line and a quarterback that's still learning, even though I think Jackson Arnold has shown that he can be very athletic, he showed that last week, my biggest question mark is I think that the biggest disadvantage for Oklahoma right now is Tennessee's front seven versus their offensive line and their running game. Joe, Jackson Arnold is their leading rusher on the year. Now, Tatum, the freshman, got going last week. He had a pair of touchdowns. He looked good. I don't know if they can run the football. Joe, what makes me believe that they can run the football at an effective rate when there's times that you can't do it against Tulane and you can't do it against Houston? But I look at the other side of this too, and it makes me cautious about saying that Tulane or Tennessee, would blow them out. I'm not predicting them to blow them out either.
Yeah.
Because I think that Oklahoma's defense, to your point, is good enough to force Nico into some bad decisions. Look, we saw NC State do it, and that defense is not as good as this Oklahoma one. But what do we know? They're going to continue to put pressure on you, meaning Tennessee, as the game goes on. And I just don't know, Joe, that Oklahoma can score enough points to beat Tennessee. I fully believe that this game, because of the build-up, college game day, all this stuff, Oklahoma's going to come out on fire. They might even go up in this game. But I think as the game goes on and it wears on and the game continues, Tennessee's just going to put too much pressure on them. I will remind you of this. Oklahoma gave up 6 sacks the last 2 weeks, 3 to Houston and 3 to Tulane. And I think that in and of itself worries me enough. But I really like what I see from Jackson Arnold with his athleticism. But he's had to run in some of these instances because of how bad his offensive line has been.
That's what I'm getting at here, is that I'm just trying to paint the picture that anyone who wants to just completely run away with this Oklahoma team's not ready for the SEC, they're going to get their asses whooped, this is going to be an embarrassment, yada, 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 to point out the performances that they've had in the first 3 weeks against Tulane and Houston. Some mistakes were made. That to me is not fully reading into the situation. Their defense is good enough to keep this game within striking distance for periods throughout. But what you just brought up, I don't have a lot of faith right now in this Oklahoma offense. I think they're still figuring themselves out. Where the stat that I misread earlier that I was trying to save for this point, they're only averaging 166 pass yards per game. 5.48 yards per attempt is extremely inefficient. And when you watch them play, they're not really taking a lot of shots. They're not connecting past the sticks.
Well,
there's a lot of times
trying to.
Right.
I mean, the film shows that they're not trying to, because they're getting burks out and screens very quick.
Yes.
They're not even trying.
I don't like that. It almost feels like maybe there's some sort of training wheels on Jackson Arnold. It feels like the general rhythm of the offense is just not there.
Let me rudely interrupt you, because you watch a lot of film. Are they putting training wheels on him, or is their O-line so bad that they don't want to get him killed that they're getting the ball out quick?
I'm not going to be able to speak to that with a ton of confidence, but I think that the offensive line stuff does feel like it comes into play here. The offensive line is probably the most concerning part, because you got a young quarterback who has made some good plays, but can be mistake prone. We saw that in the bowl game. We saw it against Houston. He had a pretty bad interception that he threw.
Saw it against Tulane. That brought him back in the game. That pick six was crucial.
He can be mistake prone and also make back-breaking mistakes that can really, really hurt you. The offensive line not being as good as it could be because it's a completely new group is going to be an important talking point for this game. Even though James Pierce Jr. hasn't been as productive as we have been projecting, the rest of that defensive line is really freaking good. I mean, we saw how they played against NC State. That could be, if there is a separation point and this ends up being more than a 10-point game, it's going to be because they get after Jackson Arnold and they just can't move the ball.
Did you see the stat where James Pierce Jr. hasn't played the last 20 minutes of any game that they've played this year?
Well, right. That again, this is another example of everything requires context, and I think a lot of people. I saw people tweeting that James Pierce Jr. sucks, and it's like, come on, we can't. They played nobody. They're not playing in most of these games. They're saving them for a game like this.
Well, correct, and that's the part where I would be most concerned. Here's another thing that I don't think people are aware of, because I think a lot of people are seeing Tennessee score this much. Maybe they watched them against NC State. Joe, I want to talk about this run game for Tennessee, okay, versus this Oklahoma defense. this is something that I also think too. If you cannot move the football offensively and this hurry up offense for Tennessee keeps rolling, they're not going to give up on the running game. And I think late in this game, Dylan Sampson and company are going to line up and run right through them. I get and I agree that Oklahoma, believe it or not, I think they're a top 3, top 4, maybe defense in the SEC this year, but they're not playing complementary football. And when you can't play complementary football, then that wears down on your defense. You got a good rotation along your defensive line. I think you got a good rotation in your secondary at times. I just don't know if they have enough because they're going to go. And I don't know if you can score enough with them. Now, I want to throw this your way too because I think this is the only way that they can beat them. Nico's got to make bad decisions. And again, NC State forced Nico into 2 very bad decisions. Now, one, his arm got hit, but it still was a bad decision. Joe, do you think we need to – look, there's 2 young quarterbacks in here. Nico's not flawless either. He's played 2 really bad teams, and then the good team, the P4 team he played, he did have 2 picks. I mean, I
don't think he played bad against NC State.
He didn't play like everybody's Joe, at the current moment,
I disagree. For young quarterback, throwing a pick's not a big deal, man. I always stand by. I'd much rather have a young quarterback take chances. The Nico mistakes are not as bad as the Jackson Arnold mistakes. They're not built differently. They're not built the same. They're built very differently.
I'm not talking about Jackson Arnold. I'm not comparing him. What I'm saying is one of the only P4 opponents that he played, he made mistakes. And by the way, this by far, because against Iowa, those guys were out. Most of those guys were out. Was it Cooper DeJean was out or whoever the guy that went to Philly was out? This is the best defense that he's ever played. And I know one damn thing. Brent Venables is going to send the house at you. Joe Burrow said this after the national championship game when they played Clemson. He said, I've never, and he said this like 2 years ago. He said the coach that confused me the most in the beginning of the game ever was Brent Venables.
Well, it's because he had the signs.
All right. I don't think he had the signs against LSU.
Sorry, I had to get that in.
you can't get off of that one. But
I won't.
To the point, I think that they can force Nico into some mistakes here.
I think with what you're saying, if Oklahoma does pull this game out, if they do win it, if this game ends up being within a touchdown, and if, let's say, the line are now 7.5. If Oklahoma covers or wins, there's 2 things that are going to happen. One, what you're just saying there, where Nico turns the ball over 2 times like he did against NC State. And 2, if that defense and that defensive line steps up and stymies the Tennessee rushing attack, which has been phenomenal. Again, they're rushing for 336 yards per game, which is
9
huge.
touchdowns.
Yeah, they have been putting up insane numbers on the ground, and a good bit of that has just been running out the clock. But I still stand by. I was extremely impressed the way that they flowed to the football, and they were aggressively flowing to the football in the film and the games that I watched of them. Stutzman's been phenomenal. Like, he has been fantastic. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that it could happen, that they play a really good game against this rushing attack, but I still think that Tennessee's going to be fine. I really do. I think that Nico is showing a lot of bright things. I stand by young quarterbacks who take risks, and even if they fail in those risk attempts, they're going to lead to huge successes in the future. I thought that the ball where it was tipped up, I don't blame him for it. And the second one, it was on him, but he was trying to be overly aggressive. Overly aggressive young players are good.
I don't mind it either, but in crucial games, that does matter.
It does.
Like, I'm looking at the game as just the game. Like, I don't think that Nico, I think Nico's going to be a number 1 overall pick. I think he has that ability. I think they got to let him loose with his legs a little bit too. I think Jackson Arnold is athletic enough. He can use his legs. You got to make him use his legs, and he's going to have to. And if I'm Brent Venables, I'm saying, listen, you got to get positive yardage. Joe, I'm not saying to do this. If his second read's not there, I'm out. I'm dead serious, because every time, if you go back and watch that Tulane game, when he's getting to his 3rd read, his 4th read, whatever it may be, Joe, he has no time. Like, and we're talking about Pat Jenkins and those guys at Tulane. Like, this isn't Tulane. And I think that Oklahoma fans, for what it's worth, who, by the way, poo-pooed on me, a former offensive lineman all offseason, every time we talked about Oklahoma, every single time we spoke about Oklahoma, my whole thing was you cannot have that many transfers along the offensive line and be a cohesive unit. I don't care how talented they are.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, you're about to find out. I think this game is close early. I could even see it being tied at half. I think
they're going to separate.
And then they're going to separate. That's how I would project the game to go. So you're picking Tennessee. I guess to wrap this up, you're picking Tennessee.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I don't know. I think that Oklahoma can keep it within 10 points because of how good their defense is. And this could be relatively low scoring than people expect. But for everything we're talking about here, the Oklahoma offense has been not as effective as it could be. It's just a tough situation for them to step into with how explosive Tennessee is.
Here's another question. I'm going to pick Tennessee. Okay, when we do our picks, here's a question that I have. I know that Oklahoma is good defensively. My question would be, is in the last 2 years outside of Texas, have they gone against a team that can really stress them with the receivers and running game that they have? Because I really don't think that Texas could stress them the way that Tennessee can. And I think it's a really good matchup for those DBs and corners. So we'll see. I'm going to pick Tennessee in this one. All right. Let's get to another one here. USC goes to Ann Arbor in their first Big Ten matchup, coming off a big-time win against LSU in Week 1, Joe. I'm not going to say this is a massive win in Week 2 when they beat Utah State, but I think it's massive in this context. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. Lincoln Riley held a team to 0 points on offense. Let me repeat that. The guy last year that everybody said was a powder puff, guy didn't want to play defense, had no idea about defense. They held Utah State to 0 points in Week 2. They're coming off a bye. They go up to Ann Arbor, though, and play the reigning national champions. Alex Orji is slated to start the game for Michigan. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, tough for Michigan to be stepping into this, that they're just now deciding on who's their quarterback, and you're making a decision in a transition from Davis Warren. Their offense is a mess. This is not the same Michigan team that we saw last year. It's brutal that you're dealing with all of this and trying to figure out what your identity is and who you can rely on offense, and who are your most dynamic playmakers. None of those questions have been answered for the first 3 weeks. They have stumbled through the first 3 games of their schedule, and the Texas game was brutal for them. And you have to face off with this USC team who is coming off a bye and had 2 huge games. They blew past Utah State, and they got a huge win where their defense stepped up and stopped LSU. I think, I feel pretty good about this, I think USC is going to win this football game because of how dominant they were along the line of scrimmage on defense. That is going to show up in slowing down Michigan's rushing attack. They're going to be able to slow down Michigan just like Texas was. Alex Orji has to be more than just a rusher. We need to see what he is as a passer. We have never seen him as a passer. Like, we still don't know what he is as a passer. Maybe he's the next second coming of Patrick Mahomes because we've never seen him throw any passes. He doesn't throw the ball. So I don't even know what to expect for this team offensively because I don't know how they're going to use him. But you better hope that he has some proficiency as a thrower. Otherwise, this game could be very lopsided, and it could be an embarrassing loss.
Joe, I think USC is the team in the country we're not talking about enough, if I'm being honest. Because, look, man, I agree with you. I think that they're going to go into Ann Arbor and win. Because here's the thing. I think Steve Sarkisian going into Ann Arbor and beating them the way that they did. And here's the thing. Joe, I think that USC's got a better running game than Texas does. They don't have a better offensive line. But, Joe, Woody Marks is going off. Like, Woody Marks, the transfer, is a really, really good back. They got a lot of really good receivers. And, by the way, you're giving Lincoln Riley a bye game going into Ann Arbor, excuse me. I'm not going to say it's going to be a blowout or anything like that. I just don't know if Michigan's got to play with the lead. They got to play with the lead. And look, I saw a Texas team do whatever they want in the passing game. Look, man, Miller Moss is highly efficient. He plays inside the system. Regardless of what you think of Miller Moss as a prospect, inside that system, he's done so well in the things that they want to accomplish. They run the ball effectively. They throw the ball effectively. But, Joe, that's not – I know that I'm getting that from Lincoln. I always feel like I know what I'm getting from Lincoln offensively. They're always well-prepared offensively. D'Anton Lynn, their DC, Joe, they're stopping everybody running the football. I mean, he is predicated, whether it was UCLA, where they were the number one rush defense last year in the country, and what they did to LSU, who, by the way, LSU went into South Carolina last week when Kentucky couldn't do it, and Kentucky just ran on Georgia. LSU and their running backs had 28 carries, 158 yards. I'm talking about that tonight, and I'll go back and watching that game. I'm like, wait a minute. USC, like the USC is able to stop them. And, I mean, look at so many different dynamics of what they've been able to do to stop the run. Joe, it's not going to be complicated. I'm going to tell you what D'Anton Lynn's going to do. He's done it every single week, either last year and this one. They're going to put 8 guys in the box, and they're going to go man-to-man coverage on the outside, and they're going to send the house at you all night, and they're going to run blitz. They're going to stunt. And if Alex Orji isn't ready for this, they're going to I don't want to say it like this, but they're going to get obliterated. If they're not ready for an outright war up front, that defensive line for USC is really stinking good.
I won't talk total obliteration, but I think the score is going to be very similar to the Texas one. I think it's going to be exactly like it, where you can't really figure out what you're trying to do on offense, and you're just feeling yourself out, and you're kind of – you get a couple plays here, a couple good rushing plays. Donovan Edwards gets a first down. But while you're doing that, your opposing team is just so efficient on offense that they're blowing past you. That's where there's the separation. It almost feels, I feel redundant in talking about this 4 weeks in. There are so many matchups this year.
Say it.
I was going to say, there's so many matchups this year where we have really well-rounded teams and overrated teams stepping into these matchups where they can't keep up offensively. They can't.
I don't think Michigan's well-rounded.
Well, but that's I'm saying that USC is well-rounded and
they are very well-rounded.
Michigan's not.
No, that defense, I'm going to tell you right now, that D-line, for everything that people say about Lincoln, Anthony Lucas, Jahel Muhammad, Barry Alexander, Nate Shepard, dude, I'm going to tell you right now, brother, they were giving Emory Jones and Will Campbell issues, and those are 2 top 20 picks, right? And I think that they don't have the offensive line like that. I don't think they can run the football like that. And so when I look at them, I just ask the God's honest question, name one thing that Michigan does better than USC at the current moment.
Well, okay, the one thing is
secondary.
No, I was going to say they pass protect better. And because actually statistically their secondary actually hasn't been that good. They're allowing, which is surprising, 234 passing yards per game, which isn't bad. But we saw the way that they played against Texas; they did not play up to expectation. But no, I would absolutely say that Michigan's offensive line is tremendous in pass protection. They've only given up 4 sacks this year. They didn't really give up many true pressures, like serious pressures to Texas, but they didn't play great. I would definitely say that Michigan's offensive line is still good at protecting. One thing just to throw in there with this conversation, Texas had their way with your secondary. USC has better weapons. Miller Moss is not as good as a quarterback and quarterback prospect as Quinn Ewers, but the weapons, the collective unit, can have your head spinning. And as good as that Michigan secondary is, they could really get stressed in this game.
I don't know if USC has overall better weapons. Like the McCree kid at tight end is a dog, and Lincoln. I guarantee you, if you call 1-800-Lincoln right now, and Lincoln Riley picked up the phone, and you asked him how many times he's watched that Texas film, it's going to be 1,000. Joe, the way that Lincoln has utilized his tight end McCree the first couple of weeks, he's been one of their more dynamic pass catchers. they're going to get Zachariah Branch out in space and say, "Go to town, kid." And look, I think there's a lot to be said. And look, I think there's a lot to be said about how much more well-rounded they are. Here's the question, and something we don't know. What if Alex Orji's able to come out and just absolutely light up the scoreboard?
See, that is like a weird contingency that applies to this game. We literally don't know what he has. Like, he could come up and just completely stink and just be god awful. Well, but at the same time,
people are going to say to you, though, in that is that, why did Davis Warren start then if he was that good?
Well, right. It's probably not. Well, he could be a gamer. Like, in all seriousness, there are some guys in the history of football, and we all know this. We all played with guys like this, not just quarterbacks. People that played high school football, people that played in college, all had a guy that they played with that were awful in practice. Awful. And then the minute that you turned to him in a game, they would make huge plays. I had a quarterback in college that was like that too. He didn't start, and then we turned to him, and then we went on a long winning streak my sophomore year, and then we were almost ranked junior year because we started.
You want to know the guy that I'm thinking about right now? I know people get on me a lot about saying this guy's name a lot. Dude, that was Jaden Daniels last year. I was like, bro, you have no idea what this kid's sitting in the pocket. He's not a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's lighting you up there. Anyway, I agree with that. Look, I think USC, look, you got to give Lincoln his flowers. If they go into Ann Arbor and win, I'm not saying this Michigan team's bad. I just think that you're facing two really potent offenses and you're struggling offensively. And Joe, I don't think that they have weapons on the outside, meaning Michigan. I just don't know if the only thing that I can think about would be maybe there being some complacency. Maybe the bye week hurts USC. I don't know. Maybe they go back to form. I have no clue. But that defense that they have put together with that staff is far and away better than what they've ever had, and why I think they're going to come out with a win.
Well, there is something to be said, and I'm not trying to hype up Alex Orji, but there is something to be said about having to prepare for a guy that you've never really seen.
Here's the thing.
You don't know what to expect from him.
I don't think that changes one thing DeAnton Lynn does. Not one thing.
Right.
And let me tell you why. Because, Joe, all the UCLA film I watched going into week one versus what he did at USC week one. You want to know how much was changed? The personnel. So it's about it. It's about it. You're going to learn. You're going to run what he runs, and you're going to get out the way. Look, DeAnton Lynn is one of those guys for me at the current moment. You better get ready you better get used to that name, because that dude's going to be in these coaching circle, these rumors.
He's going to be a head coach in 5 years.
Oh, you get five.
I had him on my top 5 defensive coordinators, and people pushed back on me. He really belonged on there.
Luke McCree, the tight end. Get used to the name. They look really good with him. You're picking USC too to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm picking USC.
Figure. All right, let's get to the last one here. Joe, a ranked matchup. And let me ask you this question, Joe. In the beginning of the season, if I would have told you week 4 is here and Nebraska and Illinois is a primetime showdown in the Big Ten, you would have laughed at me. But nevertheless, we are here. Illinois ranked, Nebraska ranked. Both teams playing really well. I'm going to kick it off to you. What do you think about this Nebraska-Illinois game?
Better yet, if I texted you this 5 weeks ago, I said, all right, we're planning ahead for week 4. Illinois, Nebraska, get ready for it. Look, this Illinois team has surprised me. They were exactly what I thought that they were going to be last year. And it's so annoying that now it comes to fruition. But they're not just a team that's kind of riding off of that Kansas win. They're really freaking dominant right now. They're only allowing 70 rush yards per game. They're outgaining opponents 421 yards per game to 255, allowing 2.5 yards per carry. Luke Altmaier has been great for what they need from him. 69% completion percentage, no interceptions, 6 touchdowns. One guy to pay attention to for Illinois, Xavier Scott, took over the Kansas game. That kid is phenomenal. The way that he played, he could be a menace. He had multiple interceptions. He could be, if Dylan Raiola has a bad game, It's going to be because Xavier Scott comes out of nowhere and picks a ball off and returns it or does something crazy with it because he is that type of an impactful defensive back.
I agree.
I, however, lean Nebraska because I can't help but focus on all of the momentum that Nebraska has right now and everything that we continue to see from this Nebraska offense. Dylan Raiola is getting better on a week-to-week basis. I can't ignore that. They're figuring out their identity and they know what it is. I think that Nebraska is going to win this. It's going to be close.
The momentum that Nebraska has right now is very interesting. I agree with that. Look, I think that this game is going to be fought in the phone booth by both teams. I think both coaches love games where it's a fight in the phone booth. I do question that Illinois over Kansas win because Kansas lost again last week. And I really wonder.
Well, it was the way that they won, though, was impressive because they completely took away that Kansas offense.
I don't disagree. And look, Luke Altmaier, for all the things that he took last year, look, I thought he was proficient last week, 19 of 29, 242 and 2 scores. He's been able to do some things. The Fegan, the running back, has 173 yards and 3 scores. They've been able to do some really productive things offensively. But to your point, defensively with Scott and others, that's where I think this game is made for them if they're going to pull out a win. I just think Nebraska's on such a different level at the current moment, on a momentum high. Joe, I do wonder how Raiola, when he's finally faced with adversity, how he reacts. And that's the thing. Like when we pick this game, I'm assuming we're going to pick this game this week. When I look at this game, I'm ready for the other shoe to drop, like most freshmen have. You know, like he's made some really, really good plays. But I'm like, where are the freshman moments? Like, where are the freshman mistakes? He's had some, but they're not leaning to turnovers. And I think that's the part where I'm asking, is he going to have that this week that's going to lead to a lot? Like, when does that happen? Here's the thing, though. He is surrounded by, and Matt Rule said this a couple of weeks ago, that he is the hardest working guy on that team, and that his level of preparedness as a freshman, going to class, coming to work out, getting ready for games, has propelled them as a team, and that's what builds culture. I'm really wondering if that other shoe is going to drop this week, because I think Illinois' defense is a lot better than people want to give them credit for.
Yeah, that's a really good conversation for this game. I really think it's going to be close because of how good Illinois is playing defensively right now. But from just a storyline perspective, I'm really intrigued by how does Dylan Raiola actually play when he's playing against a good defense? Because the Colorado defense was dookie. They were terrible. They were not a real true test. Dylan Raiola, to your point, where freshmen do tend to make mistakes. But he's not a normal freshman, man. Like, I watched some tape of him from the wide angle, and he's able to make some just insane throws. And he does it with such confidence and poise, like he's been doing it for 10 years. He is unlike anything that college football has ever seen. That needs to be acknowledged.
How does he come into a short week, too? Because if I'm not mistaken, they're playing on Friday.
Yeah, this is a Friday game.
There's a lot of conversations. And here's the thing. Thank God this game's at home for him. I don't know if it's going to be this week because he hasn't been on the road, right? And I think that's when this is going to happen, and crowd and environment gets after him a little bit.
Ohio State game is going to be the real make or break.
Well, of course. Here's the thing, though, Joe, that I look at Nebraska, though, too. We went into that Colorado game talking about, man, these Colorado receivers, man, the Nebraska ain't going to be able to keep up. And you know what, Joe? They patty smacked them. And I don't know if Illinois has the weapons that Colorado does. Now, they have a better line of scrimmage, and that's a completely different topic of conversation. They can run the ball better.
Yeah, I wouldn't compare I don't think it's possible to even compare the two.
I would compare the two in the sense of that what I was trying to get at is Nebraska, they look flawless against Shedeur Sanders. Let's call it what it is. I mean, they look flawless.
Yeah.
They confused the Rudy Poo out of him. He had no idea where to go with the football. He threw a pick six. They had a lot of really good big-time plays. Look, man, I'm gonna keep saying this until I'm blue in the face. Their front seven on defense, Nebraska, is also really talented. They're not fast, but they play assignment football and do their job, and that's why they've continued to win. Joe, I think this is a toss-up game, if I'm being honest, man. I look at them. I like both teams. I don't know where to lean here. I would lean – the only reason I would lean Nebraska would be because I do think Raiola is a little bit better of a playmaker than Altmaier. But that game being at home for them, the way that they showed up against Colorado, now they have a ranked game. Mm-hmm. Joe, when's the last time Nebraska had a ranked game at home? I mean,
that's a great point. I think they're going to be really hyped for this. And I think that's where
really hyped. And it's a Friday. The build up to this, I just don't know if I think that might be a little too much for Illinois to overcome. That would be why I lead to Nebraska.
Here's how I think this game is going to play out. I think it's going to be lower scoring. Right now, Nebraska's an 8-point favorite, which I think is just people over betting on Nebraska. I think Illinois covers. I think that Nebraska is going to win by 3 or so, and it's going to come down to a late drive, maybe getting stopped by Illinois, or a late field goal that's kicked by Nebraska, and they go down, march down the field. I don't think that this is going to be a really big, highly separated game for everything that we talked about here. That Illinois is better than people want to give them credit for. I think a lot of people look at them being ranked and kind of furrow their brow and question it and think, what the heck have they done? They tackle, they hit on defense. They come downhill hard. And if there's any way for them to pull out this, I guess it's an upset. It's not really an upset, but to pull out this win, it's going to be off the back of their defense.
I agree. Can we get to one more topic that I didn't prepare you for before we get out of here?
Oh no. What is this?
Joe, I got to go on a little bit of a rant here. I normally don't come on here and go on rants, but I got to throw this your way.
Okay.
The West Virginia fans want Neil Brown out. They want him fired. And it's interesting because their media and fan base seems to be pushing a specific coach. They're calling for Jimbo Fisher to come back home to West Virginia.
Well, that's why. It's because he's from West Virginia.
Joe?
Is that not a perfect situation for him to go to? There's not that super high expectations.
No, I want him to go there. You know why?
Why?
After the way West Virginia fans treated me, I hope that they continue to fall down the slumber. Okay? Jimbo Fisher sucks.
No, he doesn't. Jimbo at West Virginia can be successful. Jimbo totally can be successful.
He had some of the most talent in the SEC. They were third in the SEC in guys drafted. And he sucked. He can't get that to West Virginia.
Yeah, obviously, I agree with that.
It's not going to change.
But he doesn't need
philosophy and scheme's not going to change.
He doesn't need to win 10 games. He just needs to win 9 and to be in the Big 12 championship conversation.
So, with the talent that he had at A&M, and he only got to 9 wins once.
He was competing in the SEC. He was uphill battle that he was encountering.
Well, let's go through this. How many times did we come out here the last 2 years and talk about the outright dumb shit that Jimbo did on the field? That doesn't change.
That obviously doesn't change, but he also won a national championship. I'm not talking. Wait, I'm not. To be clear here,
I'm 1902.
I'm not sitting here. That it was pretty recent. I'm not sitting here saying
over a decade ago.
You sound like me when we talk about Dabo. It's not like I'm saying
conversation. How are you going to say that about Dabo? All the things that you do, and
because
not what Jimbo was doing.
The context of what we're talking about here is very different. I am saying that Dabo is in over his head because he refuses to modernize at Clemson, that now expects him to perform at a national championship level. He is no longer a national championship caliber head coach. Jimbo Fisher is no longer a national championship caliber head coach. But could he be, for the remainder of his coaching career, slightly above average? It's just like with Mac Brown. Mac Brown completely fell apart and then went back to his old gig at North Carolina. North Carolina never expected them to be national championship
winning. Please go hire Jimbo Fisher, please.
I want him to. I think that'd be funny.
In 3 seasons, you're going to be firing him.
The sport needs more stupid looks from Jimbo Fisher on the sideline. I think.
What have I always told you?
Mm-hmm.
What have I always told you?
Mm-hmm.
You can never trust a man that wears a Velcro hat.
Was he a Velcro hat guy?
He was a Velcro hat guy.
Yeah.
I put him in the realm of your boy at Iowa State, Campbell. Not Campbell. Is it Campbell? Yeah, Matt Campbell.
I don't think his hat's that bad.
West Virginia fans. But here's the thing that I'm getting at. Brother, their media is calling for him. You look dumb.
A little desperate. You a little desperate to be doing that.
Yeah. Go drink your moonshine. Shut the hell up. All right. We'll see y'all Wednesday. Y'all have a good night. Peace out, Girl Scouts.